It's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETchat. And I'm super pleased and honoured today to have Charlotte Jennings with me. Charlotte is a veterinary surgeon. I think a bit of a rock star of the veterinary profession already. She's the Chief Veterinary and Partnerships Officer of Medivet. And I met you about 2 or 3 years ago at Spivs with Andrew McVeigh. We were having a good old chat about lots of different things. And Andrew, actually, I used to work at Brian McVeigh's practice when I was in fairly new graduate. I know the oral park surgery is a Medivet practice now, and Andrew actually helps to run it, doesn't he? He's the partner there. I remember interviewing Andrew because I went to the same school as Andrew. We used to do mock interviews. This chap is thinking about becoming a vet. Can you interview him? Obviously, I knew his dad very well. I thought when I met him and interviewed him, he will get in and he will go places. And I know he's doing very well at Medivet as well. But great to have you on, Charlotte. Thanks for agreeing to come on because I know how busy you are.
No, well, thank you very much for having me. And I think you're being far too kind calling me a rock star. I think Andy is much more of a rock star than I am. And yeah, the veterinary is a small world. You never know who you're going to meet at a bar of a conference and what part of your life they're going to be moving forward. So that's always a lesson to watch.
Yeah, but it's been really fascinating because obviously done a bit of research and obviously knew you. I think you were at that time mergers and acquisitions. And if you don't mind me saying so, I think we can still class you as a young vet, Charlotte.
I'll take
You,
it.
you
I'll
had
take
you
it.
had quite a meteoric rise. You graduated from the RVC, and I think it was 2013.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, sort of 12 years on, when you left vet school, were you thinking, well, I see myself being Chief Veterinary Officer and Partnerships Officer at Medivet within 12 years. You've had quite an interesting career that I do want to spend a bit of time on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you'd have said to me on the day I graduated that I would be sat here where I am now today, I honestly would have looked at you like you were mad. At that point, I was completely and utterly horse obsessed. I grew up as one of those horsey girls, as we like to call them in the veterinary industry, and I fully assumed my future would be completely and utterly immersed in horses. And instead, I've ended up in small animal and non-clinical for a lot of my time now. So I've had a really squiggly career, and it's not been planned. A lot of people ask me, "Did you plan it?" And the honest answer is, I haven't. I think I've just made the most of opportunities that have presented themselves to me, and then also gone looking for opportunities when I felt that the role I was in that given moment wasn't the right one for me, or I was ready to explore and do something else. So yeah, it's been a journey. But I'm really happy that it's brought me here today.
It's being open to change, isn't it? And I think a lot of people are resistant to change. They don't like change. They like being in their comfort zone. I
Yeah.
don't get the feeling just looking at your CV that you're that bothered about comfort zones.
I love change. I think, to be honest, to say, like, I find it exciting. I like a challenge. That's not to say it doesn't get stressful at times. There's definitely been moments in my career where, I've come home and I've been in tears because the day's been really difficult, or I'm just not sure what to do. But in general, my personality really likes change, and it really likes throwing myself into different situations and meeting new people as well. I really have enjoyed the complete range of kind of skill sets, experience, roles that my career has given me so far.
So why did the horsey girl leave the Royal Veterinary College, have the offer of an internship, and turn that down, and then go and work in? I think were you with Anne first in South London?
Yeah. Do you know what, Anthony? I wish I had a good answer to this question because I was fully dedicated. I'd done externships out in Kentucky. I'd spent lots of time down at Lip Hook. I grew up working with point to point and eventers. So you cut me and I bled horse.
Yeah.
And to this day, I can remember sitting with my dad on the sofa at home. And just saying to him, "Dad, this just doesn't feel right. I can't tell you what, it just doesn't feel right." And I was really worried that he was going to be disappointed in me, because obviously they'd paid for me to go through vet school, they'd supported me through all my EMS, they'd sent me to America. And he was just so lovely. He just said, "You've got to follow your gut and your heart on this one. And if you're telling me this doesn't feel right, then it won't work out. So follow what feels good." And I was really lucky that Anne Nelson took me under her wing. And I know Anne's quite a big personality in the veterinary world, and probably lots of people will know Anne. And she essentially created a version of a small animal internship for me. So Anne is a brilliant surgeon, and she had me in surgery every morning with her. Sometimes it was a bit daunting, because she'd just throw me into the surgery with a textbook and a quick description, and I just had to kind of get on with it. And then every afternoon I was either consulting, or I actually spent quite a lot of time with the practice manager. So I'd spend time on the front desk with the clients. I'd spend time talking to the drugs reps, thinking about the rotors. And that's, I think, where I realized I was quite good at some of that stuff. And actually, I quite enjoyed some of the marketing bits and pieces. And perhaps there was more than just clinical work out there. I think that was really my first little insight into that. And it's serendipitous, really. If I haven't ended up at Anne's, I might never have had that opportunity.
And then I think I noticed you went off into charity, and you've obviously, that's been a theme. You've done some really lovely things in the charitable sector. Obviously, first of all, with RSPCA, which I would imagine in South London could be quite interesting.
Yeah, there are quite a few stories I could tell you, which probably aren't suitable for the podcast. But if someone grabs me at a conference at the bar, I'll happily share with you. But yeah, so we it was through Anne's, actually. We had a really close connection with both the RSPCA and the Cats Protection. But I ended up running their outreach program at New Addington, which is in Croydon. And I don't know how much well people know Croydon, but it has its fair challenges, and a real diverse kind of community. And I remember turning up on day one, and it really is a hut. I think we had electricity and water, but barely, and the equipment was minimal. And I turned up, and there was a queue out the front door of the hut, all the way around the hut and onto the grass. And I had a really lovely little volunteer called Yvonne, who I think, bless her, was about 80, who was my support. And I had a security guard who used to be there with me as well, because we had all sorts coming in, and we sometimes got into some sticky situations around drugs and all sorts. But yeah, it was a really formative experience. It was the one that's great for stories at dinner parties, but there are definitely a few times where my heart rate was pretty high in those situations.
I
um,
think I had a similar situation fairly early on. I think at Brian's, if my memory serves me right, where we had a similar hut in Kirby, which is a new town just outside of Liverpool,
yeah.
with really interesting characters. As I say, we could probably all write a book, couldn't we?
Yeah, no, but I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky for those experiences, and that was my first kind of toe dip into doing bits with charity. And I actually realized that I found it really rewarding, and I got a lot back from doing that. And I think that's probably stayed with me as I've moved on. And I don't know whether I should say this in the interview or not, Anthony, but whenever I've been interviewed for any jobs, people always say to you, what is your ultimate job? What is your ultimate career move? And I always say I want to be the CEO of a big animal charity. And that's
Yeah.
every job interview I've done, I've given that answer.
It's really interesting because obviously I know I went to Bali and wasn't volunteering over there, but there was an animal charity and we collected loads of suture materials. So I
Mhm.
would guess, kind of leading into, I know you've done volunteer work in Grenada at the Carriacou Animal Hospital.
Yeah.
Your early career with Anne and then the RSPCA, you're probably quite a fast sprayer and castrator, I would suspect.
I'm probably slightly rusty these days, if I'm honest. But yeah, back in the day, I would say I was pretty rapid. And just on the Caracu experience, like, I would thoroughly recommend anyone who can get out there to go. I actually took 6 months off work and went traveling with another vet friend of mine. And we ended by spending a couple of weeks out in the Caribbean. And it was just brilliant. Like, the accommodation is so lovely. You're really out there in the local community. In the afternoons, you're just swimming in the sea. We're going
Yeah.
fishing. A really cool experience for anyone that wants to do some charity and get a tan at the same time, basically.
Because I think the charity work is, I think we're all, as vets, we're quite purpose centered, aren't we? We don't do it necessarily for the money. We do
Hmm.
it because we love animals, etc. So it's important to have that side. And I know, with Medivet, where you now work, you've been very supportive of the Veterinary Green Discussion Forum. And I know you do a lot of work in Africa because, of course, the business itself was kind of formed. I remember, going back in history by a group of it seemed to attract the South Africans, Medivet, didn't it, when it was London, and now it's spread obviously all over the country. And, as one of your other jobs as CEO of Spain, it's spread internationally now as well.
Yeah, I've always kept that with me. And, at Medivet, we talk a lot about our purpose being to help pets and owners live their best lives. And that, to me, doesn't matter whether you're a charity client or whether, you're, one of the paying clients. The goal is still the same.
Mm.
And yeah, Medivet's heart was in South Africa with our, founding vets. And we do a lot of work with the rhinos and the Wilderness Foundation. And our teams are really, really lucky. They all get the opportunity, if they want to go out for a week or 10 days out to South Africa, and they go up in the helicopters and they're darting,
Yeah,
rhinos and taking blood samples, and, clinical and non-clinical staff get the chance to do
yeah.
that. I haven't made it out there yet, but I really need to. So that's always stayed with me. And then, I mean, when I went to Spain, Anthony, I knew nothing about the Spanish hunting dogs before I went out there. And that was a bit of an awakening for me. We don't have that in the UK in the same way. So,
Yeah.
every country has its own animal welfare issues and challenges. But that's something that really has stayed with me after my year out in Madrid, and something I'll hopefully stay close to as I go forwards. Really.
Just going back, because obviously we'll talk a bit more about Medivet in a bit, but
Yeah.
you then went completely sort of offline, out of the veterinary profession,
Yeah.
which I'm fascinated by. Travis Perkins, for those listening, is a building firm, basically, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah.
What made was this after you'd had your gap of traveling? And
Yeah.
so you obviously, most people would just say, right, I've done my 6 months, I've spayed a lot of cats and dogs in the Caribbean, I'm now coming back to work in practice again. How did you end up working for Travis Perkins?
It's the $1 million question, Anthony. I ask myself still sometimes. But, by that point, I'd done just under 5 years full-time first opinion. I've been at ANS. I worked for DNA Vet Care, which is quite a large independent group now that I'm sure many people will hear of. And I'd had my 6 months traveling where I'd met all kinds of people. And I actually, you've about to use the word blame, that's probably a bit unfair. I associate the change with living in London at the time, because I really think I was just surrounded by people who, they hadn't necessarily done vocations, they'd done history degrees and were now bankers. They were lawyers that they'd become, I don't know, marketeers.
Yeah.
And that really made me realise that you do have a passport to opportunities. You don't have to just stay as a vet. And I really just wanted to go out and experience the world. That was it. And I
Mm.
thought that being a strategy consultant or some kind of strategy role was quite a good way to do that. I'd missed the kind of all the timing on the milk rounds for the big kind of strategy kind of grad schemes that they call them. So like the McKinseys, the Bains, the BCGs. But I did my homework. I really networked. I went for lots of coffees with vets who'd gone off into other roles. And this was really before the whole vet stay, go, diversify movement was out there. If everybody had been around, I could have picked up the phone, but that just wasn't there for me. So I really had to graft. And yeah, the opportunity for the strategy role at TP came up, and it was a FTSE 100. And, yes, they were builders merchants, but they actually owned lots of other brands. So they owned Wix, City Plumbing. I won't list
Yeah.
them all, but it was really, really cool. I have to be honest. If I hadn't have done that year, I wouldn't be sat here today.
I think it's really, I've been talking about it previously, and I think we're not as conservative, but certainly, 15 years ago when I set up Webinar Vet, there were lots of CPD companies out there who presumably knew the internet existed but hadn't done anything with it. And actually, the only reason I kind of did, I had an interest in education, I had an interest in the internet. I had a website, probably one of the first. I used Google AdWords. Yellow Pages came to me and they said, "Oh, we'll get you to the top of Google for £3,000 a year." And I said, "Well, I'm getting it for 5 pence a click."
Nice.
Vets in Liverpool. So I was interested in that side of things. Went to an internet conference and heard somebody talking about webinars and said, "Gosh, why are we not doing this?" And I went round. BSAVA in 2010, saying to the big companies, you should be doing webinars. And everybody said, what's a webinar? So actually going outside of the profession, and even, one of the benefits, I think, of corporatization is it's brought clever people in ESG, in finance, in corporate, in legal, etc., who know those areas much better than we do, because we train as vets, we learn how to spay a cat, look after a dog with kidney disease, but we're not necessarily really trained. I think Nottingham does a bit more than the others in business.
Hmm.
So having that ability to get clever people in, but also as vets, to go out and see what's happening in the world. I've done a lot the last few years around, ecology and environmentalism. It's good that we bring stuff back into the profession, isn't it?
No, I think it's really important. I think for me, it's like having that open mindset and then diversity of thought, because otherwise, I think, the profession is relatively small. So I think it's really important that we keep looking outwards, for the inspiration and the ideas. And yeah, I mean, I learned stuff when I was at TP that probably isn't, on the grand scheme of things, isn't that useful, Anthony. But we were joking before the podcast. I learned things like, how do you attend a meeting? Can you eat your packet of crisps halfway through if you're really hungry? How do you start and finish an email to someone that's annoyed you or not done the thing
Yes.
you need them to do? And there's little things like that I hadn't had that experience when I was a vet. Managing teams, team performance. We did a bit of that in clinic, and I think people do probably a lot more now. But for me, that was kind of a whole new area, like social contracting. I'd never done a social contract before, stuff like that. So yeah, for me, it just really opened my eyes. But in the same breath, I only lasted a year out of the veterinary world. So whilst it was informative for me, it did also make me really realise that I really do have a connection and a passion to the animals, and that's really where I get my energy from. Whether it's frontline vetting or when I went and worked in pharmaceutical, or now my time at Medivet, that's my energy.
You've got to have something involved, because people say to me, "Oh, you're not a vet anymore." I go, "Well, yes, I am, because I'm still very much involved in the industry, and it's part of our DNA. Certainly for me, I wanted to be a vet from when I was 8, so
Hmm.
I still feel like I'm a vet, although I don't, apart from my own cat, treat, or no, should I say, the cat whom I serve.
Yes,
I
exactly.
don't really treat many animals now, although I do get lots of phone calls still. So yeah, I noticed that, obviously, and you mentioned it, you went to work in pharma for a bit, obviously Boehringer Ingelheim.
Yeah.
How did that help you to develop and then put you forward for moving into, back into practice again with, or back into veterinary practice with Medivet?
I absolutely loved my time at Boehringer. Like, I really can't say a bad word about the time and the team that was with me when I was there. And many of those guys, as colleagues, are still friends and contacts of mine now. And they've gone on to do a variety of things. Some are at VetCT, some are starting up their own kind of groups of practices. So for me, the thing I really learned at Boehringer was leadership, first and
Hmm.
foremost, but also the importance of good communication. And that is something that has really stayed with me throughout my career. And I use it a lot when I'm talking to the young vets at the moment. And I always say to them, you can be a great vet, but if you can't communicate it to the clients, you're never going to get to that next level. So that's what takes you from being good to great, is those communication skills. And that is something that Boehringer as a company is really focused on. It's very marketing centric and it's very communication centric. And while I was at Boehringer, they put me through my Chartered Institute of Marketing exams. Again, if you'd have told me on the day I graduated I'd be doing my marketing exams, I probably would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
But I loved it. The human psychology around marketing and getting people to understand the message you're trying to deliver and getting them to change their behavior off the back of it, whether that's you know Boeing is a very R&D focused company, so maybe it's launching a new medication into a different market and trying to get the vets to adopt it, or whatever it may be. That's a really powerful skill to have, and I think that's probably one of the most valuable lessons that I've learned along the way. And I have Boehringer to thank for that. And we had a lot of fun. The pharmaceutical world is fun. There's a lot of flying around to different conferences, a lot of getting to meet some very, very cool people, some really inspirational clinicians at the top of their field. They really did open a few doors, having that opportunity.
And I think, you're right, communication is so important. And I remember reading something where they said, unless you are bored about talking about this, you've not talked about it often enough.
Hmm.
And empathy within that as well. It's so important to have
Yeah.
not only good communications, but it's empathizing with your client as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's the ability to put yourself in their shoes and see the situation from their eyes. I think that if you can do that, you've pretty much nailed it.
So, and this is where it's changing Charlotte into a podcast. I
I love
thought he
it.
was outside, but he obviously isn't.
I'll
He
take it
may,
as a compliment. He's so interested in our conversation.
if he perceives this as boring, he could just press buttons on the computer. He is known for sitting on the computer, so I will, and he will give you a little nip if you're not giving him enough
Oh,
attention. So
really?
we'll see. He was well, he sort of adopted us during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had him for about 5 years, but we're just his servants, basically. You
You're,
don't own a cat, do you?
well, so it should be. We're just lucky I haven't got my whippet here because otherwise we'd be having a real exchange between the cat and the dog right now.
So moving on to Medivet,
Yeah.
you moved on to there, and I think it's quite interesting. When we met at Spivs, and I said, oh, corporate, and you immediately, very gently and kindly, I have to say, corrected me and said, no, we're a partnership. So just
Mhm.
explain that. Maybe, are you that different from the other corporates that we know that are out there?
Yeah, no, it's something that I'm kind of really passionate about, and I think there's a lot of kind of confusion around what the partnership at Medivet actually means and what it is. So, when I say a partnership, the way Medivet works is we like to have what we call a branch partner in our clinics, and that branch partner has a percentage of that clinic in an old-fashioned true partnership style, and we view that clinic as their clinic basically. So they run their clinic, their team works for them, and then Medivet provides the kind of support and the wraparound care that perhaps vets want or is just not their specialist subject. So the way we see it is it's the best of both worlds. So you've got that local relationship piece because you've got the branch partner in the clinic. They're not going anywhere. They normally live locally. They're part of the community and they build up that team around them. So you get all the benefits that brings from having a really good relationship with your clients. But then they've got access to the support center,
Mm.
legal, health and safety, all that kind of stuff. Or the really cool thing about Medivet is because we work in a network, we have 24-hour what we call hubs. And then we have our spokes around them. So, as a client of one of the spokes, you've actually got a doorway to the rest of the Medivet estate, and then we're all in partnership together. So we are actually quite different from a lot of the other groups out there. I think we just haven't done enough shouting about it or communicating, as we were just saying. And it's kind of veterinary's best kept secret to some extent. And for me in my new role, it really is a focus how, we want to offer this opportunity to more vets out there. A lot of my colleagues, a lot of my kind of peers from university are all exploring at the moment opening their own clinics. And for some people, this is a really cool opportunity where the risk is lower because you kind of got the support and backing, but the opportunity is there. And maybe it's one clinic. We talked about Andy McVeigh at the beginning. Andy's got a couple of clinics now where he's a partner in 2 or 3. He's brought young vets in to partner alongside him in some of those clinics. And you can really shape it to however you want it to work for your lifestyle, whether that's part-time, full-time, one clinic, multiple clinics. But that really is our USP. And at the moment, I'm on a personal mission to try and find some more branch partners. And only last week we had one of our new grads became a branch partner, and there really are some superstars out there that can do this, and it's a really cool opportunity for them. So yeah, it's something that I could talk for hours about, but I will stop.
I think it's interesting with you being veterinary and partnerships, and obviously understanding that the partnerships is about the practices mostly.
Hmm.
Having a vet being able to talk about that and to be able to also presumably say to people, maybe you're not quite ready yet or right, but we can maybe start you on some sort of program to get you ready, or you need to build up skills here and there. It makes it interesting. And of course, the more initials you have in your title, the better. So CVPO, I mean, it does sound a bit Star Warsy,
I,
but
I know.
it's still a good title.
That is the joke that I am the Star Wars character on the exec. But yeah, no, I do wear two quite different hats, but they are interlinked. So the CVO part of my title, everything veterinary sits under me, and I can end up in some really detailed conversations at clinical board around the topic, and then in the next breath, we're doing a more kind of commercial conversation where we're putting together valuations for these branch partners to buy in, and that's where my M&A background really helps me
Yeah.
to do that. But ultimately, you're spot on. It's got to feel right for both sides. We don't want to bring vets into partnership with us who don't want to be there. And equally, if some vets aren't quite ready yet, or if it's not going to work, then it's not going to be that win-win for everyone. And we know it can be so powerful. Like, the clinics where we have the branch partners, I think you asked me before we started, Anthony, about churn. We have much lower churn rates where we have our
Mm.
branch partners in our clinics. We have much stronger kind of client engagement scores. All that really good stuff that, as a profession, we know is super important. We see that in our clinics with our branch partners. So we're really excited to be bringing this back out to the veterinary industry at the moment.
And I think that's interesting, about the churn, because obviously if you've got somebody who's there and has ownership, it makes a difference developing the team. And also, maybe finally to finish, talking a little bit about nurses, because I think they're the unsung heroes of practice. And sometimes, they're not treated in the professional way that they should be. I remember when we did our mindfulness course with the Royal College, probably 8 or 10 years ago now. And one of the comments was, I've stopped shouting at my nurses because I'm taking a deep breath and thinking about it. And, it's not acceptable to shout to anybody in a job, I don't think. But obviously raising them up. I know you were the first group to talk about, we pay 30K as a minimum, which, seems appropriate because it's a professional job, and actually we should be promoting the nurse to do more senior things so that maybe that 5 vet practice historically can run with 3 vets if you've got really talented nurses who you're not just asking to clean kennels out all the time.
Oh, absolutely. I think they're really underutilized at the moment. And, you only have to look across some of the other territories to see how they kind of make use of their nurses to realize the opportunities that there are. And I'm a big advocate for that. And I don't want to go too near the dreaded word of the CMA, but, one of the outcomes of it might be the Veterinary Surgeons Act reform. And as part of that, the role of nurses hopefully might open up more. And for me, that's really important. And we talk a lot at the moment internally at Medivet, but I'm sure others do as well, about the importance of clients' perception of value. It's not about price, it's about value, and it's about being clear and transparent and feeling like they're getting the right value for what they've come in for. And I actually think that's where nurses can play a really important role. Get the nurses doing more consults, get them doing some more stuff with Schedule 3. I think there's some real opportunities that we can tap into around that piece. And at the moment at Medivet, our partnerships are for the vets, but we are currently exploring opportunities to broaden that and see what that could look like as well for the nurses to be part of that. Because I would not have got through my first year in small animal practice if it wasn't for a couple of nurses that I can still name straight away, getting me through some of those difficult surgeries or difficult clients. Or, I used to do on call 3 o'clock in the morning, seizuring dog, you know, really
Yeah,
were my life support in that
yeah,
situation.
yeah. No, I think it's really important, and also that communication again. With clients, often they come out of the vets, and it's actually the nurse or the receptionist that kind of explains, these are ear drops. You stick these down the ear, because again, I think there's still a piece of work, as you've said. Communication is so key to becoming a really good vet.
Yeah, and going just very quickly back to the career point, obviously I've come through the vet channel, but we've got so many nurses in Medivet that have gone on to do brilliant things. We've got them in our procurement team, we've got them in my partnerships team, we've got them in the ops team. So I also think being a vet nurse is just a brilliant passport onto other opportunities across the industry. Like, yes, you can be in clinical practice, but actually you can also have a really big impact in these other roles. And for vets and nurses, you can always go back. That's what I say to people, like people who are umming and ahhing about what they should do and should they take the leap and stuff. You've done it, guys. You're qualified. You're brilliant. Go and explore something else if you feel like it, and then you've always got that backstop, which is just such a luxury that most people don't have. And I always say when people ask me, would you go back to being a vet? I never rule it out. I will never rule out going back to veterinary.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I think the longer you leave it, the more difficult, because of course the change happens. I'm not sure anybody would want me to be doing a
It's true.
spay, but anyway, we'll leave it there. Charlotte, I've really enjoyed the chat. Thank you so much, and what an interesting journey you've taken. And yeah, good luck for the future.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it too. And hopefully it's a little bit of inspiration for someone out there who's wondering what the possibilities are. So yeah, I'm always open for people to grab me at conferences or drop me a message and have a chat. I'm very happy to support people.
Yeah, I think we're LinkedIn buddies as well, so it's always a good place to find Charlotte. She was recently talking about the special ops team at RSPCA. So if you want to have a look at that, go and have a look at her LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's my next job. Thanks,
Thanks
Anthony.
so much, Charlotte. Thanks everyone for listening. And Buddy sends his best regards. He's our chief. In fact, he's
He's
showing
off.
off now. He's our chief
He's off.
officer. Yeah, we hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you on another podcast or a webinar very soon. They always say don't work with children and animals. They always steal the show. So thanks, Buddy. Take care, everyone.